This is my prayer. Beauty that I live with. Beauty that I live by. Beauty upon which I base my life. This is my prayer. This is my prayer. This is my prayer.
Good morning. Welcome to the Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship. We're a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association. We bring the good news of Unitarian Universalism throughout this region. Our good news is a message of love, freedom, reason, respect, justice as a basis for religious community. My name is Rhonda Kosmicki, and I'm the hostess, or I'm one of our facilitators this morning. Jean Basanta and Toby Sakin will also be facilitating this morning. I'm also involved in the Sunday service committee. We are a congregation of open minds and open hearts, all ages, all colors, all genders, abilities, wealth, all kinds of love. If you're a newcomer this morning, I want to make a special welcome to you, and we're so glad you're here. Please feel free to introduce yourself on our chat at the bottom, and please stay on for coffee hour afterwards so we can get to know you better. Now I invite you to select gallery view from the top right of your screen so that we can all wave at each other, connecting ourselves over space. Hi. I love this part. So good to see everybody. And go back and forth between different screens. You got to see everybody. All right. This February, we're reflecting on what it means to be a people of beloved community. I'm going to switch back to gallery view. Today, we have the good fortune to have readings and messages from our 4 Unitarian Universalist intern ministers. And they're going to be further exploring this theme of beloved community. As a lot of you know, these interns were not able to have their usual intern experience, actually in a fellowship or a church. And so the 4 of them got together and they're doing distance internships with 4 different fellowships and churches. And they've submitted some videos for us today. There's one of them there, Heidi, and they've submitted some videos for us today for the different elements, for several of the elements of the service. And I'd be curious to see how the other churches and fellowships that are also using them, how they do it. So I might have to go and look some of those up. Our minister, Sarah Richards, will be back with us next week. In March, we're exploring the theme of commitment. And next Sunday is our Generosity Sunday, in which we'll celebrate our annual pledge campaign. And that pledge campaign is what enables us to live our mission and our vision. So now let's begin with our chalice lighting. It's a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. I welcome you to also light a flame in your home. And now here are the interns with our chalice lighting.
Our chalice lighting for today is from A Community of Faith by Judith Quarles. At this hour, in small towns and big cities, in single rooms and ornate sanctuaries, many of our sibling Unitarian Universalist congregations are also lighting a flaming chalice. As we light our chalice today, let us remember that we are part of a great community of faith. May this dancing flame inspire us to fill our lives with the Unitarian Universalist ideals of love, justice, and truth.
I'm also lighting the chalice here. And now with intention, I'm placing a pebble in my bowl. And this is to mark, and I invite all of you to do this in your homes, to mark a sorrow or joy or something else that you might be feeling during the service. And now we'll have the opening words from our interns.
Our opening words today are A Place of Belonging and Caring by Kimberly Ann Tomzek Carlson. It is not by chance you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to all of us when we share. And so, you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to the possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship.
And now please join us in singing our hymn, Return Again, and Pat York will lead us in the hymn. We're going to mute everyone else, and so we all get to sing duets with Pat, so just go for it, and we'll just follow along with Pat.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return to who we are, return to what we are, return. Born and reborn again, return to who we are, return to what we are, return to where we are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return to who we are, return to what you are, return to where we are, born and reborn again. Return to who we are, return to what we are, return to where we are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul.
Our reading today is by Dr. Anthony Pinn from his book, The End of God Talk, an African-American humanist theology. Community is the foundational symbol, the proper centering point for African-American non-theistic humanism. Perhaps most notable about this humanist formation of community is the disconnect between it and the beloved community promoted by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and used to portray socio-political and spiritual togetherness desired as marking the civil rights gains within a redeemed nation. African-American non-theistic humanist ethics promotes a sense of proper conduct or action as the fragile consequence, first, of grounding the individual in an appreciation of life lived as fundamental. Second, with a sense that life so understood is embodied. And third, that it has to do with the real occupation of space and time in new ways.
Now is the time in our service that we share sorrows and joys in fellowship. A time for personal milestones of emotional and spiritual significance. Some of us come today with heavy hearts and deep concerns. And sharing pains and sorrows sometimes can help us. And so we open our hearts to you. Will those who have a deep personal concern or a sorrow that they'd like to share, please raise your hand, unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and share with us. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay. I missed the service last Sunday because I was with my next door neighbor, and her husband had been in the hospital for a week, had suffered a stroke, and he actually died last Sunday. And I really want support for her. She and her husband had only been here a couple of years and had no other friends other than the neighbors. And she is, first of all, she's just in shock and just in deep, deep grieving. And so, but Nora doesn't know what she's going to do next. She doesn't know whether she's going to go back to Chicago or what she's going to do. She's just lost, and I'm just trying to be there to support her, but she really needs people sending her the energy to help her make the choice that's going to be best for her. But like I said, right now, she's just in the deep, deep, loss of losing someone suddenly, and then trying to figure out what to do next with her life. So I'm really feeling for her, and glad I have some of the background skills that hopefully are helping her.
Thanks, Mary. Anyone else with a sorrow, a concern that they'd like to share?
TK, I think.
Hi, so my Meemaw died this week, and I think the hardest part is that I normally sing at my family's funerals when they pass on, and we can't do that, so it feels harder because I'm not having the closure that I would normally have. It also is harder because my mom has been caretaking her mom, my Meemaw, for months, and under Tennessee's laws was supposed to be able to get vaccinated as a healthcare worker, even though technically she's not, because she's caretaking for somebody who's over 75 in hospice and stuff, and they kept denying her that. And she finally got it, and then got COVID 2 days after getting her first shot. And then Meemaw ends up dying just a few days later, and my mom's okay. I think the shot at least helped it from being as severe of a case and stuff like that. And it's just a lot right now, and I've thrown out my back, which is why I'm in the bed. And I guess that's because I don't know why. And everything's piling on top of each other. But that's all. I'm done.
We're really sorry, TK. And if you need any help with anything, everybody here is for you. And so in any way, we'll want to help. Anybody else want to share? I don't see anybody. Nobody else. Well, just as some of us come with sorrows and concerns and real pain in our hearts, at the same time, there are joys and reasons to celebrate in life. And so now I'll ask those who have a personal joy that they'd like to share to raise their hand and unmute themselves and introduce yourself and share with us. We'd love to celebrate that joy with you.
Hi, this is Kathy O'Laughlin, and Friday I celebrated my retirement from Jackson County Health Department, so I've joined the ranks.
That's wonderful. Retirement is a wonderful thing, and so we celebrate with you. I don't know if is Joletta on today. I don't know if she is, but she retired as well. I think her official retirement is Tuesday, but she really finished her job this past week.
My joy is hearing Pat sing and play. That was phenomenal. Thank you.
Yes, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Oh, Jan.
Well, this has been a week of ups and downs for me. But before I begin, I'd like to say to TK, I read once where we hold our grief in our backs. So maybe that's the reason that you threw out your back. I don't know. Last Sunday, I celebrated my Aunt Millie's 95th birthday. I actually lost her last March, but she was such a phenomenal, loving person, and it was wonderful just to think about her. So my ups and down was I spent some time with Judy Carter this past week, and I was talking to her about my daughter, Sarah, who I had lost 10 years ago, and just the ups and downs of our relationship, and just brought up a lot of joy and a lot of sadness. My final joy, yesterday, my husband Bill and I celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary and our 31st year of joy and happiness and partnership with each other, and spent the evening at my daughter Leah's house, having dinner and eating anniversary cake. So it's been a week of ups and downs.
Congratulations. Any other joys that anyone would like to share or reasons to celebrate?
Like Mary Ellen?
Well, when I talk about my grandchildren, I get all choked up. I can hardly speak. The good news is they're in for the weekend from Florida, even though they've only been gone a month. But I got to see them both yesterday in the driveway, 10 feet apart, in the open air. And we had some sharing time. And it was just wonderful. It changes my whole life to see my two granddaughters. So That's a really happy thing that happened.
We're really happy for you. That's wonderful. Anyone else? Well, then for all the sorrows and joys that have been shared aloud, and for those that have not been shared, but we feel in our hearts and souls, let's observe a moment of silence.
Please join me in prayer. Spirit of life, in whom all love and community has its being.
Beloved mystery.
Beloved Holy One, eternal and eternally changing infinite friend.
Source of all common creation.
Open our souls to the voices of this community and to the voices of those who have yet to come.
Provide us the wisdom, will, and welcoming nature necessary to achieve common well-being.
Help us to live into our communal nature, so that we may live together in love, peace, and justice all the days of our lives.
Let us, our beloved community, be a beacon of what love means, so that others, seeing this light, move from the darkness of hatred.
Let us not look away from the needs of our neighbors, but instead advocate and strive alongside them for those life-affirming conditions.
Bless us with the persistence in striving for love and interconnectedness. Share with us your grace. Bless us into an embodied, expansive community, and hold us in love as you remind us that when we are together, you are also there.
In the name of the Spirit of love within us, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen, and blessed be.
Our second reading today is from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from The Role of the Church in Facing the Nation's Chief Moral Dilemma. He says, "The end of nonviolence is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opposers into friends. The type of love that I stress here is not eros, a sort of aesthetic or romantic love, not philia, a sort of reciprocal love between personal friends, but it is agape, which is understanding goodwill for all man. It is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. It is the love of God working in the lives of men. This is the love that may well be the salvation of our civilization."
Just as we share our sorrows and our joys in fellowship, we also share our financial resources too. We actually share so much, I think, with each other. We share our talents and our energies and our time, and just thank you so much, and our care and concern for each other. So thanks to all of us, and thanks to everybody for everything that you do. This month, our social action recipient is the Good Samaritan House. And if you have any questions about that, you can ask Mary Campbell about that. And it's just a wonderful place that does so much. And we are starting something new this week. Remember how in the good old days, during the service, you could put your pledge in the basket, or you could make a contribution to the social action recipient, or you could throw some change in the basket. Well, we can't do that anymore, but now we're going to try something. Well, we're going to start something. I shouldn't say try. We're going to put a link to our PayPal in the chat. Amy just did that. And so you can go on during the service while you're thinking about it, and you can make your donation there if you'd like to. And if you do that, please be sure to put in the memo line what that donation is for, like if it's for your pledge, or if it's for the Good Samaritan House, or our mortgage burning campaign, something like that. So that way we know. And if you're making it for two different things, you would need to make two separate donations and into the PayPal. And also, of course, you can do that other times and still send checks and things like that too. But we're just trying something new. Let's see. And a reminder, next week starts our campaign, I guess we used to call it the stewardship campaign. Now I think we're calling it our generosity campaign. That's what it is. And generosity campaign. And we're having Generosity Sunday next week. And so now here is Jean Basanta to tell us a little bit more about giving during our upcoming annual pledge campaign.
Good morning. This is a generosity team moment. I'm Jean Basanta. I'm a CUF member, and I'm also part of this year's Caring Community Connection generosity team. So I wanted to take just a couple of minutes this morning to tell you a little bit about why I'm a CUF member and why I pledge to support CUF. And there are lots of reasons, but I've thought of three that I'd like to mention this morning. First, I truly appreciate the spiritual dimension of our congregation, whether it's our chalice lighting, our readings, the music, the meditations, the chants. All of these feed my need for spiritual reflection and growth, and I just truly appreciate them. Secondly, our social justice work together means a great deal to me. The Social Action Committee that I'm a member of and the Green Team are very important to me. Our Welcoming Congregation Committee as well. As I reflected about this, I thought to myself, until 2016, I was basically a sideline supporter of social justice efforts. But since the 2016 election, I feel like I'm more in the game and find that very fulfilling to be more involved in social action. And lastly, my feelings for and attachment to CUF, the CUF community, are captured in some of the lyrics of a song. It's actually the theme song from a TV sitcom. It's the theme song from Cheers, which ran on NBC from 1982 to 1993. And I did watch Cheers. And I just want to read some of the lyrics to you now. I'm not going to sing them because that would not be a good thing. Just read some of the lyrics. And as I do, think about our congregation. Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. And to me, that's CUF. Thank you.
So as I play the quartz crystal singing bowls, I invite you to relax totally in your body and breathe in and out very slowly, and just allow these vibrational tones to vibrate every organ, every bone, every muscle in your body, and all of your chakras.
The Fruitlands community experiment was supposed to be Bronson Alcott's legacy. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he was Louisa May Alcott's father. In his time, he was equally, if not more famous than his daughter, hanging with that crowd of Unitarian individualist forefathers, the Transcendentalists. Anyway, in the winter of 1844, after only 9 months of struggle, he found himself homeless, bedridden, having a nervous breakdown, and penniless. His family nearly left him. His idea of building an intentional community of transcendentalists out in the farmlands of New England had backfired gloriously. He and his partner, Charles Lane, had hastily moved their families 14 miles away from Concord in the late spring of 1843 without thinking much of what they were going to need to survive. If you build it, they will come, they might have thought, but instead, this bedlam of good intention folded after a few months of noble striving. Louisa May Alcott, years later, would fictionalize this project in her short story, Transcendental Wild Oats, which is both hilarious and somewhat of an indictment of individualism. Because individualism is not made up to build communities. The idea that a person alone is morally better than a community of people is at the core of some of those transcendentalist ideas. And it can work if one is alone at Walden Pond, but not with 14 of your closest friends and family in one farmhouse at Fruitlands. Of course, Thoreau was not really alone, but that's maybe for another discussion. I've been thinking about intentional / utopian communities lately. I mean, who hasn't dreamed of getting a cheap plot of land and gather all their like-minded friends, spend idle time sitting around this imaginary campfire, hanging and talking about beauty and truth? Well, according to the internet, a lot of people do. However, it would seem that over the course of history, Bronson's experiment wasn't the only one that failed. And in fact, if you Google, why do utopian communities fail, you will find 19 million hits. And yes, I know, not all intentional communities are utopian, but many are. The theme this month is beloved community. And I realized that talking about a failed utopia in the middle of the New England farmland seems a bit off topic. Utopia means no place, because a vision of a perfect communal existence in the best of all possible worlds is really aspirational. A place where one can start over, do over, and all will be perfect. Can that really exist? Because humans, we are perfectible, aspirational, teachable, but we aren't perfect. We are messy. We are what my 15-year-old calls gross, but in a good way. And I think that most of the reason these communities fail is that they have been organized with the intention of throwing out the proverbial baby with the bathwater and starting completely over. There is a lot of choosing on a binary. Yes, this, no, that. Eventually finding our place on either side of this imaginary dividing line that says either you're with us or you're against us. All the things that are thrown out, seen as imperfect, and therefore assumed to be of no use. Here's the deal, though. Individualism, perfectionism, a sense of urgency, like, oh, let's move to Fruitlands, it'll be perfect, let's go, let's go, let's go. This either or thinking, they are cornerstones of white supremacy culture. And as such, when we use them or if we use them to construct a community, regardless who's in it, we're going to get a community rooted in white supremacist culture every time, even when we don't set out to do that. And this is the opposite of beloved community. Beloved means someone or something who is dearly loved. Applied to a community, it takes away the duty-bound implication that all will be perfect and points to love as the connecting principle. This is love as agape, as Dr. King says in the reading, love as goodwill to all humans. But it is also what Dr. Pin in our other reading calls the appreciation of life. Life lived fully as embodied. In these imperfect human bodies, what Cornel West calls are cracked vessels. Let me get biblical for a minute. In the writings of the prophet Isaiah, we find a bit of talking about the lion and the lamb living together, the cow and the bear grazing together. This is Isaiah telling us that there is a kind of peace that is different, but we can still imagine it. So have you ever thought what it would take to get predator and prey to hang out together? Does it just happen? No, it takes a retooling of our imagination. It takes radical love. And hear me out, this is love as a verb, to love, not simply a feeling. In beloved community, we have to show up to transform each other. So I want to end by going back to Bronson Alcott. He did fail in Fruitlands, but later in his life, and almost unintentionally, he did succeed in forming a community where he could thrive. In 1857, the Alcotts moved to Orchard House in Concord, close to their transcendentalist friends. And then there they began a supportive community where people cared for and supported each other. In Concord, the community was willing to come back to the table and solve disagreements and help one another through good and tough times. It would seem when they set aside individualism and chose to understand and respect their own individuality, that they love each other into a better community. You see, being teachable, messy, imperfect, and aspirational is in our UU legacy, and our UU faith compels us to be in a world where aware of both the worth and dignity of everyone and everybody's interconnectedness. May we be bold and creative to act in love, which is a verb, when we are called to be in community.
My feeling about beloved community comes from 3 incidents in my life. The first occurred many years ago at a church in Chicago. It was sad. One of our members committed suicide. A friend called me, very angry, saying that our church was a false church. We cared about each other on Sunday, and the rest of the time, we didn't care. When I started to protest, she stopped me saying, "Oh, it isn't only the suicide, even the good things we don't care about. No one said anything when I graduated. No one even said anything on Sunday." An incredible sadness came over me because I knew she was right, and I was no exception to that. I realized then that being a beloved community is not just a Sunday thing. The second lesson for me about beloved community came with studying Buddhism. I went to what is called the Dharma teaching on being non-judgmental. When I thought about being non-judgmental and the beloved community, I realized that being in community is not approving every action another person does. Just as we make mistakes, so do others. Rather, being non-judgmental is having compassion without judging who we think is worthy of our compassion, our support. Compassion is wanting the well-being of the other person as strongly as I want my own well-being. I will admit that this is difficult for me. It is easy to support, to be compassionate toward those who like me and whom I like. But that misses the whole point of beloved community. From a lesson on being non-judgmental, I learned that beloved community is a radical compassion for everyone in the community. My third lesson about beloved community came from being burnt out in my previous profession. At the time I retired, I had what was known as compassion fatigue. Beloved community is not limited to our congregations. The compassion we have for one another moves into the broader community. We want the well-being of everyone. So I had to ask myself, how could I avoid compassion fatigue and be in a beloved community? I remembered somewhere learning that social justice that is not based on spirituality is shallow. In time, we will stop engaging in justice because we become worn out with the small gains we see. I think that is also true of engaging in beloved community. Perhaps being in beloved community is not so much a matter of attaining an entity, something we can wrap our arms around called beloved community, but rather perhaps beloved community is a continual spiritual practice of compassion. Our hymn, Spirit of Life, calls on the Spirit to move in us, to stir compassion in our hearts. Whatever for you that Spirit of life is, that Spirit is the basis of our beloved community. Calling on the Spirit renews us both individually and collectively. We have 6 sources of wisdom. We can draw on those to develop a spiritual path so that we can build within us, both as individuals and collectively, the spiritual resources to continue to engage in beloved community. May we go forward as a beloved community in our congregation and beyond it in the world.
Lately, I've been struggling with some questions about cultural misappropriation. This is an especially difficult topic for me because 1, I'm just not as educated on it as I wish I was, but I'm working on that. And 2, I consider myself to be pretty spiritually fluid and borrow from a variety of different religious traditions. The difficulty, however, of incorporating different religions into my spiritual path is that it's hard to guarantee that I'm always doing it respectfully, even if my intentions are good. Is it okay for me to keep a taijitu hung in my room as long as I appreciate the meaning behind the symbol and do my best to practice what it represents? Is it okay to meditate simply for the purpose of releasing stress? Or is it problematic to divorce meditation from its Indian spiritual origins? Those are all difficult questions. Recently, I was ruminating on this question so deeply, it was giving me some anxiety. So I actually talked to my therapist about it. and she said something that stuck with me. It was along the lines of, you don't need to put a moratorium on all spiritual practice until you fully understand what is cultural misappropriation and what isn't. Ultimately, because we're so entrenched in systems of oppression, it might to some extent be impossible to avoid misappropriating at times. But if you make a mistake, just learn from it and replace the practice with a spiritual practice that's less problematic. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we should just feel entitled to colonize whatever spiritual practice we so desire. We need to be aware of issues like cultural misappropriation, especially in eclectic traditions like Unitarian Universalism, where it's a major risk. But we're gonna mess up occasionally, and that's okay. We're human. The important thing is to learn from it and to correct ourselves when we find out we've been misappropriating. Now that's all good, but at the end of the day, there's a system that makes it possible for misappropriation to happen. So while we need to be mindful of that risk, imagine if we could create a system where colonialism wasn't so inherent in our ideology that we wouldn't constantly be at risk of doing harm. Imagine if we could easily borrow from other traditions and mix and match and exchange without risking economic exploitation. Today's second reading discusses the importance of changing systems. Until we do that, the ideal of beloved community, Pin argues, simply can't exist. We shouldn't misappropriate, but more importantly, what if we actually fought to change the systems that make misappropriation possible? We shouldn't say racist things, but more importantly, what if we fought to eradicate racist systems that made racial foot and mouth syndrome such a risk? Reduce, reuse, recycle, yes. But until we change the system that makes it impossible to live our daily lives without harming the environment to some degree, it's only gonna go so far. We can begin loving in ways that move toward the ideal of beloved community, but to get there, the system has to change. So over the next few days and upcoming months and years, let's think deeply to ourselves and ponder the question, what can we do to change the system?
This is what community looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what community looks like. These were the words that were spoken in unison by tens of thousands of people marching along St. Louis city and county streets and highways, in front of police stations, courthouses, and city halls this summer. And not just here in St. Louis, of course, but all over the country, even in some rural small towns where just a few dozen folks might come out and show the world what community can mean. When I heard those words spoken, when I spoke those words, standing next to clergy from Catholic, Episcopal, African Methodist Episcopal, Reformed Jewish, Baptist, and United Church of Christ, and Muslim congregations, it was incredible. When I saw that Black, white, indigenous, Asian, Middle Eastern, Latinx, male, female, non-binary, trans, lesbian, gay, bisexual, asexual, able, disabled, young, old, middle-aged, every conceivable shape, shade, size, and stripe of human being was marching, singing, and shouting in community with one another, it is indescribable. And that's what is perhaps the most difficult and frustrating aspect of this elusive concept we call, as Dr. King taught us, beloved community. It's that it's so hard to articulate the sheer beauty, the power of it is even for the brief tantalizing moments right in front of us, all around us when we're a part of it, almost impossible to conceive of. The kind of solidarity, bonding, and mutuality of well-being with people who are at once total strangers, their lives and lifestyles completely foreign to you, yours to them, and yet the precariousness of all of our lives and lifestyles in that moment when you're marching towards a line of flashing red and blue police lights, completely interdependent. You're there to honor lives you never knew, to stand for lives walking right next to you. And yet, all of you could be stuffed out in a split second if just one or two things go squirrely. We've sadly seen it happen for generations now. Mortality, perhaps, is the crucial ingredient, that aspect to our base mammalian need to be in community with one another. The ingredient that undergirds in so many ways our desires for a better world, a more united country, a deeper spiritual understanding of our siblings of color and of other marginalized identities. Dr. King puts this motivating factor of mortality into his definition of beloved community. He says, it is the love of God working in the lives of men. Well, what is the love of God? For Abraham, the love of God was the promise of generations of offspring inheriting a holy land. For Moses, the love of God was the promise that the people would treat one another justly, and that God would provide for their needs and usher them to a safe haven. For Jesus, the love of God was communion, a shared meal that meant the physical needs of anyone and everyone who was there to receive it were met. This love of God, these aspects of beloved community, are about taking care of one another in a very real way. You can safely have and raise children. Those children can look out for one another and grow up in a safe place. They can feed, clothe, love, and live alongside one another in an interconnected web of mutuality. But that's not necessarily what many of us immediately think about when we hear beloved community, or when we hear about God's love working in the lives of men. Because those are lofty, elusive concepts that we have to reduce down to sort of utopian platitudes. A ring of rainbow people with hands held tight singing. But that's not reality. The reality of beloved community is the essentials of life, generously accessible and shared, because of the recognition that all lives are worthy of this type of love. This is what Dr. Pinn is talking about when he says the difference between Black humanist community and Dr. King's beloved community is that is appreciation of life embodied in actual space and time in new ways. Pinn is basically saying, I don't care if you have goodwill towards your fellow man. You can't eat goodwill. Goodwill won't keep you from getting murdered by the police, or keep someone else so desperate for food money that they'll shoot you for it. Goodwill won't pay for new textbooks or tablets for school kids. Goodwill won't close the generational wealth gap or provide home loans for young Black families. Goodwill only goes so far. It doesn't actually build community. It just means you're amenable to the concept. The actual building of community comes when we are so acutely aware of our interdependence and shared mortality that we truly understand the depth of the message that Black lives matter. They matter, like our own lives, so much that the conditions on the ground in real time and space must be reimagined in new ways in which everyone is afforded life-affirming conditions. That racially skewed socioeconomic pseudo-meritocracies are no longer used as barriers to the ability to live. If we really want to see the love of God working in our lives, if we really want to see beloved community, we have to actually show a love of life, especially the lives that are not our own. This is what community looks like.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on me, sister, when you need a friend. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. If there is a load that you must bear, that you can't carry, I'm right off the road, and I'll share your load. If you just call me, oh yeah, just call me, call me. If you need a friend, call me, oh yeah, call me, call me, call me, oh yeah, call me, call me, call me, call me.
Wow. Sunday services like this are recorded and posted on the CUF YouTube channel. So if you need a shot of our beloved community at any time of the week, just type in Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship in the YouTube search bar, click on playlist, and you'll see a listing of those services and music that are currently available. And I want to also draw your attention to the announcements that were in your order of service this morning. Now, let us give thanks to our musician, Pat York. Thank you, Pat, for such beautiful music. Thanks to Amy Weber, Jean Basanta, and Rhonda Kazbicki for being our Zoom host this morning. And of course, thanks to our interns for their meaningful messages. That's Dee Evans, Matthew Villarreal, Sabrina Trupa, and Corey Lovell. Thanks to all who helped make this service what it is, and that's each and every one of you here today in online fellowship. If you're a newcomer, we're happy you joined us this morning. And please put any questions you have and contact information in the chat box, and we'll follow up. Now, if you are with someone, please join hands for our benediction. And if you are with someone in spirit, please feel free to raise your hands, palms up, to receive our benediction this morning.
Our closing words today come from Universalist Hosea Ballou. If we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good. Let us endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bonds of peace. Amen.
And now go in peace with love for justice, but don't go far because we'll have coffee hour right after this service.